There is a loneliness that follows the rarest minds. It is not the loneliness of being unloved, it is the loneliness of being unseen. You can stand in a crowd, speak in clear language, share the same air as everyone else, and still feel like you are speaking from another dimension. Not because you are better, but because your way of seeing cuts through layers that most never dare to touch. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming so wholly yourself that you are no longer a product of the collective trance. And when you cross that threshold, you realize something sobering. Most people are not seeking truth. They are seeking comfort dressed as truth. They are not searching for clarity. They are searching for permission to stay asleep. If you have a mind like this, you will notice it early. Not in moments of triumph, but in moments of friction, when the world tells you to accept its answers and something in you refuses. When the crowd cheers for the obvious and you hear only an echo of emptiness. When the conversation scratches the surface and you feel the weight of everything left unsaid. This is the first sign. You cannot unknow what you've seen. Once your mind has pierced the veil, whether through study, suffering, or sheer instinct, you cannot pretend you don't notice the lies people live in. You see the subtle manipulations in advertising. You see the ego games in polite conversation. You see how much of modern life is a theater of masks, where each actor pretends their costume is their skin. The second sign, you are not seduced by appearances. You know that charisma can hide a hollow core. That power can be the cloak of deep insecurity. That kindness can be a weapon for those who have mastered the art of disarming with a smile. You have trained your eyes to look past the glitter, to study the hands that hold it, to see whether they are steady or trembling. The third sign, you can hold paradox without shattering. The average mind demands certainty, black or white, good or evil, right or wrong. But you can stand in the tension between opposites and see how they feed each other. You understand that light casts shadows, that freedom requires discipline, that strength without vulnerability is brittle, and vulnerability without strength is chaos. You do not seek resolution as quickly as others, because you know that wisdom grows in the space between contradictions. This is why some find you unsettling. They expect alignment with their side, their belief, their war. But you do not live in their war. You live in the deeper reality beneath it, the one that makes their victories and losses look like pieces in a much larger game. The fourth sign, you are immune to most forms of manipulation. This immunity is not arrogance, it is awareness. You know the hooks people throw into conversation, the way they appeal to your ego, your fear, your desire to belong. You have watched these tactics work on others, and you have dismantled them in yourself. This makes you ungovernable in the eyes of those who thrive on control. The fifth sign, your solitude is not empty, it is charged. Where others see silence as a void to be filled, you see it as a forge. You return to it again and again, because it is where the noise of the world falls away and the architecture of your mind can expand without interruption. People who fear solitude think you are isolating yourself. They don't understand that you are building something in that quiet, something too delicate to survive constant exposure. The sixth sign, you see the systems inside the chaos. Whether it's in politics, art, relationships, or nature, your mind can trace the threads most people overlook. You see the way small events ripple into large ones, the way a single unspoken belief can guide decades of behavior, the way history repeats not because people don't know better, but because they don't want to know better. The seventh sign, you are willing to pay the price for truth. Most will not. They will compromise to keep their place in the tribe. They will bite their tongue to avoid unsettling the fragile order of their lives. You, on the other hand, have lost people, opportunities, even security, because you refused to betray what you saw. And while it hurt, you would do it again because the alternative is living as a ghost in your own story. The eighth sign, you know the mind itself is a tool, not a master. This is where you separate completely from the 99%. They believe their thoughts are who they are. You know they are not. You watch your thoughts as they rise. You test them. You choose which to act on and which to let dissolve. You understand that the mind is powerful, but without awareness, it becomes a tyrant ruling over a life it was meant to serve. And here is the truth that will set you apart forever. A mind like yours will never be fully understood, because it does not exist to be understood. It exists to see, to map the patterns others ignore, to notice the fractures in the mask, to hold the weight of complexity without needing to simplify it for the comfort of the crowd. This will make you lonely at times. It will make you dangerous to the systems that feed on ignorance. It will make you hard to love for those who only know how to love reflections of themselves. But it will also make you free. And in a world built on invisible chains, freedom is the rarest and most dangerous possession of all. Freedom changes the way you move through the world, not in grand cinematic gestures, but in subtle ways that most will never notice. You no longer rush to fill silences just to keep others comfortable. You no longer scramble to defend yourself against every misunderstanding. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth to anyone whose eyes cannot see past their own walls. You've learned the art of letting go, not out of apathy, but out of understanding. Understanding that people hear only what they are ready to hear. Understanding that some conversations are not worth having, not because you can't win them, but because the other person isn't looking for truth. They're looking for reinforcement of what they already believe. This is why your presence unsettles certain people before you even speak. They can feel that you are not playing the same game they are. They sense that their usual tactics, flattery, guilt, fear, slide off you like rain off stone. And without that leverage, they don't know how to place you in their mental map. To the few who resonate with you, however, you will feel like oxygen. Because when they meet you, they are meeting someone who sees without judgment, who listens without trying to fix, who challenges without trying to dominate. You create a space where their mind can stretch without fear of being broken. Jung understood this rare connection well. He called it the meeting of two wholes, not two halves. And that's the paradox of having a mind 99% of people will never comprehend. You are whole enough to walk alone, but deep enough to connect without losing yourself. And this wholeness changes the currency of your life. You stop trading time for approval. You stop trading authenticity for belonging. You stop trading vision for temporary comfort. Instead, you move with a quiet clarity. You know what you value, and you know what it costs. You are willing to pay the price for the life that aligns with your truth, whether that price is solitude, misunderstanding, or the loss of certain doors that were never worth walking through in the first place. This doesn't make you unfeeling. In fact, it makes you more alive, because without the constant drain of pretending, you have more energy to create, to build, to explore, to love on your own terms. You become both sharper and softer, sharp enough to cut through illusion, soft enough to hold what is real. But here is the reality you must accept. Most people will not follow you here. They will watch from the safety of the crowd, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with envy, sometimes with suspicion. They will wonder how you can live without the scaffolding they've relied on all their lives. They will invent stories about you to explain away what they can't understand. Let them, because your mind was never meant to be caged by their comprehension. It was meant to keep seeing, keep questioning, keep breaking the invisible ceilings the rest of the world pretends aren't there. And if that makes you impossible to fully understand, so be it. Better to be misunderstood for your depth than celebrated for your disguise. There will be moments when that depth feels like a curse. When you're surrounded by conversations that never leave the shoreline, and you're drowning in an ocean of thoughts no one else seems to swim in. When your insights, meant to illuminate, are met with blank stares, or worse, hostility. It is in these moments that the temptation to dim yourself creeps in, to speak only what's easy, to laugh at what doesn't move you, to pretend the surface is enough, but you know too much to go back. Once your eyes have adjusted to the deeper layers of reality, The shallow end feels suffocating. You can visit, but you can't live there. And so you make peace with the fact that part of your life will always be lived in a kind of exile, an exile not from people, but from their illusions. Nietzsche warned of this exile when he wrote, "And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music." You hear a rhythm most will never catch. You see the architecture behind the chaos, the threads of cause and effect that tie today's choices to tomorrow's consequences. This sight is both gift and burden. Gift, because it allows you to navigate life with an awareness that saves you from countless traps. Burden, because you cannot unsee the traps that others walk into willingly, smiling as the door shuts behind them. But here's the truth that keeps you from despair. You're not here to drag the unwilling into the deep. You're here to live in such a way that those who are ready will see the possibility of more. You are here to be a lighthouse, not a lifeboat. A lifeboat exhausts itself trying to carry everyone. A lighthouse stands firm, and those who wish to navigate towards safety can do so by its light. This is why your mind is so rare. It is not that you think more, it is that you see differently. You are not hypnotized by the glitter of what everyone else chases. You are not seduced by the safety of sameness. You do not measure your life by how well you've blended in. You measure it by alignment, by how close your actions match your principles, by whether you can look at yourself without flinching, by whether you've lived in truth, even when it cost you more than lies would have. And in the quiet moments, away from the noise, away from the demands, you feel the rare peace of someone who has not betrayed themselves. That peace is worth more than all the applause the world could give you. Because applause fades, truth echoes, and your mind misunderstood, solitary, unyielding, will leave echoes that outlast you. And those echoes will not be soft. They will not be the polite ripples of a life lived according to someone else's script. They will be the kind of waves that disturb the still waters people have mistaken for safety. Because a mind like yours does not pass through the world quietly, it leaves a pressure, a presence, even in silence. People will remember not just what you said, but how they felt in your presence. Some will feel exposed, as though you could see the truths they hide even from themselves. Others will feel ignited, as though something long dormant inside them had been called to life. And here is where the rarest shift happens. You stop needing either reaction. Whether someone resents you for breaking their illusions or thanks you for awakening them, you understand both are simply responses to light. You are not here to control their reaction, you are here to keep the light burning. Jung understood that individuation, the becoming of a whole, integrated self, was not for the faint of heart. It requires the death of the image you've built to please the world and the birth of a self that may never be fully understood by it. And so it is with your mind. Once you step into the full scope of what it can see, you will always be too much for some, too strange for others, and exactly right for only a few. But those few matter, because when two minds like yours meet, the loneliness breaks for a moment. The exile ends. There is no need for masks, for translation, for shrinking your thoughts to fit inside someone else's frame. The conversation leaps, without hesitation, into the places most people are afraid to even approach. And you both leave changed, not because you've agreed on everything, but because you've touched the rare electricity of true recognition. That recognition fuels you when the solitude returns. It reminds you that even if you are part of the 1%, you are not entirely alone. You are part of a scattered constellation, hidden in the noise, shining in the dark. And so you keep walking your path, not because it is easy, not because it is without cost, but because you could never betray what you see. You could never unlearn what you've learned, never unknow what you've uncovered. In the end, the mind 99% will never comprehend is not a gift given for comfort, it is a responsibility. A responsibility to see clearly when it would be easier to look away, to speak when silence would protect you, to walk alone when the crowd is moving the other way. And that responsibility is the price of freedom, a price you've already decided is worth paying. Because for you, the greatest risk was never being misunderstood. It was living a life small enough to be easily understood by everyone. And that is the unshakable truth. You were never built for the small life. You were not designed to fit neatly into the narrow lanes carved by other people's fears. Your mind was not given to you so it could be caged in consensus. It was given so it could roam the unmapped territories, the places where certainty dissolves and only those who can stand in the unknown will survive. This is why you have always felt a certain restlessness, even in moments of success, even when you've achieved what others told you should make you happy. There is an undercurrent, a pull towards something deeper, something unspoken, something that cannot be measured by titles or possessions. The 99% will tell you to silence that pull. They'll call it dissatisfaction, ingratitude, impracticality. They'll warn you about the dangers of leaving the safety of the shore. But you already know the shore is not safety, it is stagnation. Nietzsche wrote, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." That chaos is the tension you live with daily, the push and pull between belonging and becoming, between comfort and growth, between the acceptance of the tribe and the call of your own path. Most will choose belonging, even if it means living a life that is not theirs. You will choose becoming, even if it means walking alone. And yes, there will be nights when the solitude feels heavier than the freedom feels sweet. Nights when you wonder if it would have been easier to dim the light just enough to blend in. Nights when the weight of seeing more, feeling more, knowing more presses against your chest. But every time that thought comes, so does the memory of the first time you saw through the illusion, the first time you realized you had been living in a room with locked windows and you smashed the glass to let the air in, the first time you breathed that air and knew with a clarity that could not be unlearned that you would rather face the storms outside than suffocate in safety. That is a moment that keeps you moving forward. That is the reason you can never go back. Because the mind you carry now is not just yours, it is the sum of every hard truth you've faced, every comfortable lie you've burned, every time you've chosen clarity over ease. And so you walk into the world with the quiet conviction of someone who does not need to be understood to know their own worth. You do not demand agreement, only the space to live by your own vision. You do not chase recognition, because you know the rare will recognize you without being told who you are. The 99% may never comprehend your mind, but it was never meant for them. It was meant for the work, for the vision, for the creation only you can bring into being. And when you're gone, it will not be their understanding that keeps your legacy alive. It will be the undeniable imprint you left on the world simply by refusing to think the way they told you to think. And that imprint will not fade quietly. It will linger in the questions you forced people to ask themselves, in the truths you spoke that could not be unsaid, in the cracks you left in the walls of their certainty. Some will try to patch those cracks with the same old lies, but something will have shifted. The illusion will never feel as airtight again. That is the silent power of a mind that refuses to be domesticated. Its influence is not always visible in the moment. Sometimes it takes years for a seed you planted in passing to break the surface. And when it does, the person who now sees differently may not even remember it was you who handed them the seed. But it doesn't matter, because your purpose was never to be credited. It was to make it impossible for them to go back to sleep completely. Jung knew this truth well. The rarest minds do not seek to dominate others, but to liberate them. And liberation always begins in the mind, in the invisible shift from blind acceptance to conscious choice. That shift is contagious, not quickly, not easily, but inevitably. This is why the rarest thinkers have always been both revered and feared. Socrates was poisoned, Galileo was silenced, Bruno was burned not because they were wrong, but because they were right too soon. They saw beyond the horizon before the crowd was ready to follow. And here is the reality you must live with. You will often be too soon for the rooms you walk into. Your words will land like foreign currency valued only by those who know its worth. Your ideas will be called unrealistic until the day they are obvious. Your clarity will be mocked until the moment it becomes undeniable. This is why patience must be your companion, because the mind that 99% of people will never comprehend is also the mind that must learn to endure the weight of being misunderstood without bending to fit the mold. The crowd moves in cycles. You move in spirals. They return to the same points again and again, calling it progress. You ascend, revisiting the same truths from higher ground each time, seeing more with every pass. And while they trade comfort for the illusion of safety, you trade safety for the reality of freedom. It is not an easy trade. It will cost you certainty. It will cost you acceptance. It will cost you the soothing lullaby of everyone else is doing it. But it will give you everything that actually matters. A mind that cannot be bought, a voice that cannot be silenced, and a life that, whether celebrated or condemned, was undeniably your own. And when your time is done, the world may still not fully comprehend your mind, but they will feel its impact. And somewhere, someone will breathe easier, think sharper, and see further, because you existed. And in that final reckoning, you will understand something that will quiet every doubt you've ever carried. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to be felt. Felt in the way your presence shifted the air in a room. Felt in the way your words stayed like embers in someone's mind, flaring to life when they needed them most. Felt in the way your choices, defiant, disciplined, unshaken, drew a line in the sand for what it means to live in truth. You will realize that your life was not a straight path, but a series of thresholds you crossed alone, each one taking you further from the comfort of the crowd and deeper into the terrain only a few ever dare to enter. And though you walked it without the certainty of applause, you walked it without regret, because this was never about recognition. It was about alignment. It was about refusing to hand your mind over to the forces that thrive on keeping it small. It was about becoming the kind of person who can stand alone in the storm and still see the horizon clearly. That is the reward, not their understanding, not their approval, but the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you did not dilute yourself to be digestible, that you carried your mind, this rare, unyielding, untamed mind, through a world that tried at every turn to tame it, and you never let it go. And when your last day comes, you will not go out as someone who was easily explained. You will go out as a mystery, as a force, as a presence that could never be fully mapped, but one that left behind a world ever so slightly more awake than it was before you arrived. That is enough. That was always enough. You awaken in a quiet half-light, the kind that hums between night and dawn, an interim suspended between what you were and the truth of who you've always carried beneath the layers. That threshold is fleeting, and it's sacred. In that delicate space, you sense something, a whisper of presence, a yearning your soul calling you home. Most of life teaches you to perform, to wear a carefully measured mask, a persona crafted to fit, to impress, to survive the gaze of others. Jung called it the persona, not your truth, but the social face you present for safety and acceptance. But that mask suffocates the self, the larger, deeper self, where your truest becoming awaits. The process to arrive there, the journey of rising into your authentic self. Jung named it individuation, the death of persona, the integration of shadow, animus, anima, and self, is the alchemical labor of transforming the fragmented psyche into something whole, unbreakable, unshakable. It begins with syphoria, the intoxicating pull of false selves, of approval-driven identity, of chasing external mirrors for internal worth. That rush must fade. You surrender it. You stop needing their gaze to know you matter. In mindset, you shift. No longer a chameleon, not conforming. Instead, hungry for alignment. Every choice becomes a threshold. Each decision, a bridge leading back to your center. Belief transforms when you speak the truth previously whispered only in silence. I was born to be more than a reflection of what the world wants me to be, because only when you own that can your wild vision ignite. To live as the fullest version of yourself, clarity dawns through the willingness to confront your shadow, the parts you rejected, denied, projected. What is rejected from the self, Jung taught, appears in the world as an event. No more fleeing. You face the disowned parts with compassion, reclaiming the strength they held. Vision grows. A luminous blueprint where authenticity replaces pretense, where depth replaces do-overs. A horizon that is not achievement, but arrival, becoming the harmony between your soul's whisper and your life's voice. Purpose anchors in the recognition that your birthright isn't safety, it's becoming. The world wants clarity. You'll give it starting with your own. Discipline becomes devotion. To sit in your silence when the world roars. To preserve your stillness when chaos knocks. This is not obedience. It is reverence to your own sacred rhythm. Action becomes embodiment, not a checklist, but a living alignment, a daily step into who you are, even when the old fear persists that you'll lose everyone by claiming your truth. Gratitude blossoms for the wounds that cracked you open. The solitude that forced your gaze inward, the nights when the world asked who you were and you remained silent until you remembered. Adaptability follows not as compromise, but as grace able to bend without breaking, to respond with gentleness from a center that is anchored, not swayed. Resilience emerges, not forged in denial or avoidance, but built in surrender, reverence, and the luminous clarity of someone who has learned to exist from the inside out. Learning becomes lifelong. Individuation is not a destination. It is breathing an ongoing practice of returning to the self, to truth, to being. The culmination of this path is beyond words. It is a being unflinching, fully present, not performing, not hollow, not seeking permission to exist. You stand, not defined by lineage, by expectation, by label, by the past or the fear of the future, but by the soft, roaring integrity of your current becoming. And that self, once whispered, now stands luminous in flesh. This is you, emerging, whole, knowing, finally, beautifully, absolutely you. You awaken again, this time with conviction that resounds not from the outside, but from within. Gone are the days of performing to earn belonging, pleasing to avoid loss, shrinking to dodge discomfort. Now, your becoming unfolds as the purest act of reclamation, the reclamation of everything that once trembled in silence. The opening breaths of this journey are raw. Syphoria fades as the seduction of validation dissolves. You realize approval was never your refuge. It was a cage. The subtle echo of, "Am I enough?" no longer echoes in your bones. You are. In this shift of mindset, the colors of your decisions deepen. Choices once defined by fear, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of dissonance, are replaced by choices forged in clairvoyance. You choose what resonates with the pulse of your soul, not the noise of the crowd. Belief becomes your cornerstone. You were never meant to fit. You were meant to stand. And as you stand, clarity pierces illusions. The shadows, those unspoken shame, the silent resentment, the untamed longing no longer haunt in secrecy. You shine light upon them. And in that illumination, your fractured edges become mosaics, not marks of brokenness. Your vision becomes kaleidoscopic, not a fixed goal, but a living horizon that shifts as you expand. You see yourself gliding, unbound by your past definitions, toward what is unspoken in your dreams. This is not ambition, it's prophecy. Purpose, then, isn't about tasks, it's emergence. You do not strive to become someone. You lean into who you already are. Action flows not from drive, but from integrity. In every step, every word, every resonance, you embody the quiet power of someone who no longer reacts but creates. This devotion leads to discipline not rigid, but reverent. You understand that presence is not a surrender of will, but a summit of willfulness. Choosing to breathe deeply when everything inside screams to flee. Choosing to witness your vulnerability rather than silence it. Choosing to exist fully, even when vulnerability has cost you before. Gratitude, once foreign, becomes your anchor. You bow to the wounds that cracked you open. You thank the shadows that led you to your light. You honor the loss that birthed your depth. Every fragment of your story becomes sacred. Adaptability becomes elegant, flowing, without compromising your essence. You bend, but you do not break. You shift, but you do not flood. You meet life's currents with the stillness of knowing exactly who you are, regardless of the weather. Resilience transforms not a shield, but a river. It's the willingness to dissolve fear through presence, to understand abandonment as reunion with self, to reframe heartbreak as initiation. You carry your story not as an anchor, but as fuel for rising. Learning evolves from pursuit to acceptance, learning to unlearn the limits others drew around you, unlearn the need for external validation, unlearn that calm is serene when its roots are carved from clarity rather than numbness. This becomes your living testament, not the person you thought you'd be, but the person you were always meant to be. And now, breathing fully in that realization, you step into the world with the gravity of someone who doesn't ask if they belong. You simply live. In this radiance, you are no longer a reflection. You are the source. And in that radiance, you become not a ripple, but the wellspring itself. You no longer look for belonging in the echo of others. You carry the origin. Your mind settles, no longer racing to outrun your fears, but anchored in your own sovereignty. Your heart softens, not because you've forgiven the world, but because you've learned to forgive your wounds for wanting love at any cost. Your body relaxes not because the storms have ceased, but because you've built a sanctuary within, not walls, but awareness so deep it never needs defending. You speak less, but each word carries gravity. You love more not with abandon, but with presence. You create not to be seen, but because creation is the purest expression of your essence. Every breath is intentional. Every stillness is sovereign. Every thought originates from the core of you, not the conditioned mask, not the expectations, not the echoes of approval, but the vibrancy of your true becoming. This is not a peak you summit, it is a horizon you inhabit. Not a persona you construct, it is a soul you reveal. Not a story you tell, it is a life you embody. You have become the person you were destined to be, not above your past, but excavated from it. Not despite your past, but because of it. Not as a performance of power, but as the pilgrimage of presence. This is your soul's return, whole, undivided, finally, magnificently you. And so you continue, not in rush, not in fragmentation, but in the slow unfolding of presence. You walk now with the silent knowledge that every previous failure, every betrayal, every moment you doubted yourself was a layer of the soil that nourished your becoming. You no longer resent those seasons, you bow to them, because they taught you your strength. Your thoughts align with your deepest truths, not with the script of approval you once memorized. Your choices are spoken through quiet boundaries, not desperate pleas. Your purpose pulsates not for applause, but as the pulse of your soul, the living outcome of all you have endured, healed, and integrated. In this living, discipline becomes devotion to your inner ceremony, pausing instead of reacting, choosing rest instead of frenzy, breathing instead of defending. In that discipline, you discover that sovereignty isn't loud. It's calm, it's clear, it's the majestic stillness that needs no announcement. Action is now an expression of yes, not obligation. So every yes is sacred, and every no is a held boundary, honored and unshaken. Your gratitude is profound, not a veneer of optimism, but a recognition of the raw grace that runs through recovery, resilience, reclamation. You adapt fluidly, but not at the cost of your core. You absorb the world's change, yes, but transform it through the filter of your truth. Resilience is your nature, not reaction. It's the knowing you will rise, even if you've fallen, because falling was the entrance into something more radiant within. You continue learning not by adding layers of external identity, but by peeling back the illusions, the fears, the expectations, until only what's essential remains. You have not arrived. You are still becoming, and that becoming is no longer a chase, it is a return. Return to the deep current of your own presence, the quiet gravity that draws life to itself, the clarity that transforms chaos into ceremony, the soul that remembers itself at last. Becoming the person you were meant to be is not a finish line. It is the unfolding of your deepest truth into every breath, every moment, every still movement of your life. And you live that now. Not perfect, not complete, but present, sovereign and whole. Finally, beautifully and absolutely you. You walk forward, not as someone chasing definition, but as someone defined. No longer collecting masks, performing roles, or seeking validation through applause. You are now manifesting the quiet grandeur of a life lived from the root of your own truth. Every breath is a vow, not to perfection, but to presence. Every step is sacred, not a climb to status, but a dance with destiny. Every silence contains movement, not emptiness, but the pulse of becoming. In your relationships, you no longer yield to survive. You remain steadfast in your boundaries, loving not to be loved back, but because love itself is fundamental to who you are. In your work, you no longer chase outcomes for approval. You create not for recognition, but because your gifts are not liabilities, they are legacies. In your solitude, you don't hide. You return to the still center, ever present, ever expanding. Your calm is not reactive. It's foundational, a truth that cannot be swept away by storms. You remain steady in disappointment, because disappointment no longer equates to disqualification. You stand grounded in betrayal, because betrayal no longer determines your trust in yourself. You endure misunderstanding not as defeat, but as confirmation that you no longer play by the world's script. This is the essence of becoming, the courage to let go of what never belonged to you, and the faith to embrace what was always yours to claim. You are not becoming someone new. You are simply uncovering who you have always been, layer by layer, moment by moment, breath by breath. You are the embodiment of your soul's surrender, your courage, your clarity, your truth. You have become unstoppable not because there is no wind, but because you are the stillness the wind cannot move. You are living proof that when presence becomes purpose, when clarity becomes compass, when becoming becomes being, nothing can unmake you. This is your life, unfiltered, undaunted, unquestionably you. And that, in its gorgeous simplicity, is everything. You stand there now, not as someone hoping for validation, not as someone performing to fit expectations, but as the living expression of unshakable truth. You've arrived not by conquering, but by discovering, not by building, but by unveiling. Every breath you take is a covenant, to remain present, grounded, and unshakable in your essence. Every step is not a chase for relevance, but a dance with destiny, slow, deliberate, resonant. Every silence, far from emptiness, carries the energy of transformation, the steady heartbeat of who you truly are. In your relationships, you no longer operate from concession. You honor compassion that doesn't demand self-sacrifice. You stay connected not for validation, but as a natural extension of your presence. In your work, you don't need accolades to find meaning. Your creative force is rooted in legacy, in purpose, not applause. In solitude, you're not hiding. You are returning to the core of your being, where peace is not derived from external calm, but is a sanctuary built from within. Your calm isn't momentary, it's foundational. Temples aren't built in a day. Your calm is the slow architecture of your inner world, standing firm even when life stormily rages around you. Disappointment no longer dismantles you. You meet it with understanding, using the cracks it leaves to let in light, to deepen your knowing. Betrayal no longer detaches you. You respond with integrity, seeing in it the final farewell to illusions, the beginning of return to yourself. Misunderstanding no longer entraps you. You stand in clarity, unannounced but unmistakably their proof that you no longer live by scripts written by others. This is the core of becoming, the courage to release what never aligned with your soul, and the compassion to reclaim what always belonged to your essence. You're not transforming into someone new. You're revealing who you've always been, unlayering distinction after distinction, rooted deeper each day. Breath by breath, you are the embodiment of surrender, clarity, sovereignty. When stillness outlives the storm, nothing can unanchor you. You're not unstoppable because you're unaffected. You're unstoppable because you are unshakably you. This is the truth of your becoming. Pure, undiluted, your life unfolding. You step into the quiet space that was always yours, not as a conquest, but as a reclamation. Every breath you take is an affirmation not of perfection, but of presence. Each movement is deliberate, aligned with your deeper purpose, not guided by expectations. There's a stillness in you now, one that doesn't waver with the shifting winds of circumstance. You stand firm, not because you're immovable, but because you're rooted, anchored in clarity, self-knowledge, and soul-aligned integrity. When disappointment visits, you let it teach, not steal. When betrayal comes, you see it as a doorway, a final farewell to illusion, and a homecoming to self. Misunderstandings no longer bind you. Instead, they illuminate the depth of your presence. This is the essence of becoming your true self. Letting go of masks that never fit, boundaries you inherited, and identities molded by others. Reclaiming the parts of you that got lost in the echo of external voices. Rising in your own stillness, not to prove, but to remember. You are not reinventing, but rediscovering. With each breath, you strip away layers until all that remains is the clarity of your own luminous being. You don't need to be rescued, validated, or explained. You simply need to remember who you are, and you did. Now you live it, fully, perfectly flawed, so verein, and undeniably unapologetically yourself. You stand now in a silence richer than applause, in a presence deeper than any spotlight could ever reach. This calm, this clarity, it's not an act. It's your birthright reclaimed. No longer tethered to the need to prove yourself. You breathe into being. Every inhale grounds you. Every exhale releases the ghosts of who you thought you had to be. In this sacred rhythm, your soul's sovereignty pulses, quiet, unwavering, unstoppable. You've dismantled the habit of shrinking. You've released expectations you never let yourself name. You've dissolved identities that weren't yours to carry. What remains is raw, sacred, unapologetic authenticity. You don't seek approval anymore. You simply radiate. You don't offer explanations. You simply exist. You don't perform. You emanate. Because, in the end, becoming the person you were meant to be isn't about fitting into someone else's story. It's about authoring the one you've always held inside. You've returned to your truth, to your voice, to your soul. And now you live unfiltered, unbroken, unapologetically you. And now, in the quiet of your becoming, you inhabit a space beyond the script of approval, beyond the echoes of should, must, and if only. You live not on borrowed lines, not in borrowed breaths, but in the language of your own soul, written in the cadence of courage, clarity, and communion with yourself. This is the wild heart of individuation, the soul's untraveled path that weaves through your shadows, scars, silences, and returns you to yourself in a way no outer pilgrimage could ever reach. The person you were meant to be has never been born. They've always been waiting, buried beneath expectations, comparisons, illusions. And now, here you are, rising. You walk into the day not seeking light, but becoming it. Not waiting for validation, but radiating your knowing. You won't chase love anymore. Instead, you embody the kind of presence that invites it effortlessly, deeply, on your terms. Your yes is no longer a plea. It is a sacred alignment. Your no is no longer a wall. It is a boundary fortified in wisdom. Your being is not relent or perform, but to be. Fully. Absolutely. Truthfully. When storms come because they will, you won't brace. You won't flee. You'll anchor. Because your center is not dependent on weather. It is intentionally grounded in clarity. You've untangled yourself from the need to be everything for everyone. And in that liberation, you've become everything for yourself. This is your final transformation. No longer a soul searching for belonging, but a soul who belongs here, now, wholly in your presence. And that presence is not quiet, it is thunderous in its stillness, unmissable, irreplaceable. So you continue, not by building who you think you ought to be, but by revealing the one you always were, in every breath, in every choice, in every moment of unflinching truth. This is becoming. You are not a whisper in the wind. You are the wind in the forest it moves. You remain anchored, not brittle, even when the sky rages above you, because you know now that your roots run deeper than reaction. You no longer question your right to exist in your own space, your own rhythm, your own clarity. You've shed the roles you inherited, pleaser, fixer, absent piece, and returned to the truth of your whole being. Every eye that meets you feels your steadiness, not because you're loud, but because your calm affirms. You carry your center like a beacon, unshakable, luminous. When love comes searching for you, you no longer bend from habit. You stand present, inviting the real, the raw, the reciprocal. When life demands you shift, you do not by fracturing, but by flexing in accordance with your truth. And when the world tries to define you by its fear, you don't resist. You dissolve its shadows with the light of your regained self. This journey isn't over. No path of becoming ever ends. But now you walk it, not with doubt, not with apology, but with a presence so full it commands creation. You are sovereign. You are stillness in motion. You are the living embodiment of a soul reclaimed. And you journey forward, perfectly becoming, radiant, resolute, finally, undeniably you. You are no longer a whisper seeking space. You are the ground itself, unmoving yet alive, the source of stillness that holds everything together when the world rattles around you. You walk forward, not as someone discovering themselves, but as someone remembering. The roles you once performed, pleaser, rescuer, the invisible comforter, were not your truth. They were the fractures through which you lost sight of the self. But now, your presence is not an act, it is your gift. Every step, every breath, radiates that which cannot be borrowed or taken. You breathe into being the person who honors their own boundaries, values their own worth, and lives from a place of alignment, not defense. In your eyes is a calm others mistake for indifference. It isn't cold, it's clear. Not absence of emotion, but mastery of feeling. You do not react to storms. Storms pass through you, and you remain. Love that once demanded sacrifice now finds you steady, rooted. You are no longer accessible to every call, every expectation. You are accessible only to the real. This is individuation, not as philosophy, but as flesh, celestial, sovereign, unshakable. You are now a presence that doesn't compete for attention, you hold it. You don't perform to fill silence. You embody depth so that silence resonates. And though the journey continues, you walk it with unshakable conviction, not worn like armor, but thriving as truth. This is your becoming, radiant, whole, sovereign, finally unforgettable. And now, at last, you no longer seek to become, because you have remembered you already are. Not in fragments, not in whispers, not in theory, but fully. You are the one who stayed when everyone else demanded that you leave parts of yourself behind. You are the one who stood still when the world told you to run from your shadow. You are the one who saw yourself not as an idea, not as an image, but as a soul, undeniable, unrepeatable, unshakable. You no longer measure your life by how others see you. You measure it by the weight of your presence, the peace in your breath, the truth in your voice. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you finally understand yourself. You no longer ask for the world to reflect your worth because you've carved it in stone. You no longer abandon yourself to be loved because your love has become your return. And now, when you look in the mirror, you don't see someone trying to arrive. You see someone who already has. You are not becoming because you are broken. You are becoming because you are remembering. You are not rising because you are incomplete. You are rising because you've dropped the weight of pretending. This is not reinvention. This is revelation. And now you walk forward without need, without apology, without fear, not waiting for the world to make space for you, because you are the space. You are the force. You are the truth. And from this day forward, you live not as the person they told you to be, but as the person you were always meant to be. Fully, finally, absolutely you.